Just having a giggle with both Noel and Trevor here as we got into this show because I, gentlemen, am going where angels fear to tread. In fact, most golfers, their words like shank and yips that is kind of like taboo, huh? But now you guys are convincing me, and you're going to convince the audience now, Trev, that the yips is no longer a death sentence for a golfer. So let's start right there. Have a go.
Yeah, you know what, Mark, and it's just great to be on the show. Noel and I have been on quite the journey for the last few years and have kind of joined forces. And as you said in this space, the Yips has become a bit like Voldemort. This it's just people can't even say the word, right, without getting chills down their neck. So we've done a ton of studying, a ton of kind of applied stuff with players, and we've come up with a bit of a flexible framework that's creating a lot of traction in a space that, has been like a puzzle inside of a mystery, inside of an enigma. And we've got some really good kind of neuroscience behind us. And I've actually just come back from presenting at a World Psychology Conference on our work. So yeah, it feels kind of hopeful in a place that's been hopeless.
Noel, it's amazing to me in golf how, and this is a Nick Faldoism. I've been lucky to know him throughout my life, where he's like, golfers never prepare for their B or C or D games. When they practice or whatever, it's just thinking of the best case scenario.
Right.
But then when it comes to like the yips, it's like, how on earth do you prepare? In fact, a dear colleague of mine and friend, I won't use his name, he is sort of a little yippy around the greens with a wedge. And he was one of the great short game artists of all time on the PGA Tour. So I want you to elaborate a little bit there because again, like Trevor points out, this is one of those things where like, oh gosh, I got the hips. Yeah, how do I practice? Well, what do I do?
Yeah, right. I mean, it faces a lot of people. I mean, a good friend of mine is doing his PhD or has actually just completed his PhD in the yips. And the data's like, I mean, it's like 50% of golfers will experience the yips at some point in their game, which is a lot more than you might think, isn't it? And in some people it goes under the radar; they may not know they have the yips, but I mean, that is a big number, isn't it? So I mean, initially, it's about really understanding some of the patterns that are at play. I mean, the first thing that people sort of try to do when they get the yips is, I mean, we're talking. Let's talk chipping. Initially, I mean, obviously, it can happen in putting, in full swing as well. I mean, that's a really upsetting thing to happen. But let's talk chipping. That's probably where it's most prevalent. I mean, initially, people just want to make sure that they strike the ball, and they'll do anything they can to strike it. And in that desperation, will recruit all the wrong processes, do all the wrong things, and really start to spiral this thing out of control. So, I mean, from my side, from the technical part of our partnership here, it is understanding the processes of over control. So, what it is to really over control, what it is to have too much ball focus. I mean, that will absolutely send you in the wrong direction. And learn drills that will encourage trust and flow and a better visual gaze on the ball. Believe it or not,
Okay.
a lot of the things we do to try and make sure that we strike it are actually sending us down in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to mine this further, but before we go there, let's put you into context for our global audience. It's a partnership, Trevor Jones, Noel Rousseau. Trevor, tell us about you a little bit before we dive in.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So I'm a PGA professional, but also a mental performance coach for a group called the UF Performance Group, and we look after special forces, military, air force, baseball, basketball, and of course, lots and lots of golfers. And as I was just mentioning, kind of just before, I've just presented at a world conference with regards to our work in this space with the Yips. And sometimes I like to ask people, being interviewed on various podcasts with regards to this, just a really simple question that kind of sets up a little bit of this framework that we use with the Yips. So do you mind if I ask you, Mark, like, what do you like as a passenger in a car?
The proper music being played, a smooth ride, a safe ride.
Beautiful.
All right.
And that word safety, like the answer, of course, is always, it depends. It depends on who's driving, and it
Mm-hmm.
depends on how they're driving. And I wonder if you can think of someone in your life who maybe being a passenger when they're driving is Like you can feel just that little trickle of anxiety kind of showing up.
I'm not gonna say this is my wife, but she does have a lead foot.
Yes, right. And I wonder if you can imagine what your reaction might be if your wife was driving and you all of a sudden drove into heavy fog and then she hit the gas, like that lead foot kicked in. Like,
I'd be stamping on the imaginary brake in the passenger seat. Okay.
so this is exactly what happens with the yips. So
Okay.
the yips is where a part of us, our nervous system, specifically the vagus nerve, essentially pulls the handbrake. So we're players who are suffering from the yips are essentially in the fog. That they're kind of being bombarded by either technical information or concern or a threat response, and they're in this very, very fog-like experience. And they typically respond to that by trying to rush through it as quickly as possible. So that the lead foot kicks in, they hit the gas, and then a part of them sees all of this and pulls the handbrake. And this is where you get these really clunky kind of movements. And that's essentially what we're working with. So the flexible framework that we've created is juxtaposing what we call kind of bad driving with ace driving. So bad driving stands for blind spots, avoidance, and distraction. So typically, as Noel was saying, a lot of people don't realize this is happening. It's all very much under the radar. Or when it's happening, they try and avoid it like crazy. So they try and go to lots of different technical instructions. They try different techniques. They try and change their clubs. They try and change their grip. They try and metaphorically change the car that they're driving in. And then they also try and distract their way through it. So they try singing a song or counting backwards or humming or, the whole 9 yards. And of course, that just makes this passenger that's pulling the handbrake more anxious, not less. So we kind of flip it. And what we're looking for instead is what we call ace driving. So we initially just want to slow this whole thing down and just acknowledge what's showing up in this place. Because typically the stuff showing up isn't very comfortable, but it is really important to acknowledge.
Okay, so if BAD stands for blind spots, avoidance, and driving,
Distraction.
Distraction, forgive me.
Yes.
ACE then I'm sure is an acronym for something or not?
Acknowledge, compose, engage. So the first thing we need to do is kind of acknowledge how and where this is showing up. So that sense of anxiousness that you thought about with your wife with the heavy foot.
She might listen to the show. Huh? Okay.
is kind of locating where is that? Where does that reside in your body?
Gotcha.
And actually beginning to locate the origins of this kind of fear response is really, really powerful. From there, we can start to build some composure, and then engage. When people are engaged in the struggle with this, they become so kind of problem focused. They tend to lose connection with the type of journey that they actually want to be on with golf. It becomes all encompassing. It's a little bit like a black hole. It just pulls all of that resources into trying to solve this problem.
Yes, I got another question for you, but first I want to introduce Noel. So Noel, Trevor's the PGA guy, but he's just given me some very insightful insights there. Tell us about how you fit into this mix.
Oh my goodness! So so I'm a PGA professional, and initially I had a really sort of strong interest in sports psychology, and I did a PhD in automaticity. So I was listening to your recent podcast with Carl Morris around focus and self-organization. Well, that was my sort of eight-year research. So we'd have a lot to talk about with Carl. And in that journey, and around how we coordinate our movements and how much we think about the swing, I mean that really led me down a route of developing a bit of a specialization with working with the yips. I mean, in my own game, I developed the yips as a teenager and sort of somehow managed to focus on certain parts of the swing that would almost kind of inoculate me from having those sort of really sort of nasty strikes. And then over the years, sort of developed a bit of a protocol for working with players with the yips. And as the years went by, I through my studies of psychology and a deference, if you like, to traditional sports psychology, I met Trevor, who was on a similar path. And since then we've been teaming up with this, and it really has made a big difference to the success that I've been having with players, having that space where I can work with them on technique and focus, etc., and then have Trevor backing up with some of the more in-depth sort of emotional stuff. That has been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I want to keep it with you, but Trev, what Noel just said there wants me to pivot to you because like you talked about the black hole and how it becomes like all encompassing. It could be like like a health issue. Like if you've got something wrong with you, it occupies your mind, and no matter how much you try and detract or focus elsewhere, it's always there. It's like going, like if I'm going to play TPC Sawgrass, I'm thinking about the 17th Island Green when I'm on the first tee. Maybe when I'm warming up before the time. Now, is beating the Yips as much as where you talk about ace, acknowledge. So I acknowledge there's an issue. Compose myself. Is it as much as going, well, yeah, I know the 17th is coming. I know I have the Yips, but I have the tools to overcome this. And even though I fail once or twice, I'm still on the road to recovery. Are you understanding where I'm trying to go with this?
So beautifully said, and that's really profound, actually, because that type of way of interacting with this is really a powerful shift to make, because very often clients are kind of stuck in this place of this must never happen again, forevermore, amen.
Yeah.
Like this handbrake must never be pulled because of the embarrassment or because of the stigma or because of the anxiety and all of that stuff. So people end up in this space of playing golf on something the size of a postage stamp, right? They're in this tiny little space where they can't think what they think, they can't feel what they feel, and they can't experience what they experience. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's just like my heart goes out to people in that space, because it is, they're in for a torrid time. So we're kind of we're working within this flexible framework of beginning to kind of start to unwind the space in which they get to play in. So starting to kind of broaden out, have them have a healthier relationship with essentially this part of them that's not trying to hurt them. Like if you were reaching for the brake with your wife driving, you're not trying to hurt the driving process, you're trying to protect the both of you, right? Mm-hmm. And this part of people is trying to do the same thing. It's not trying to hurt them, it's trying to help them. It's just going about doing so in a way that's needs more flexibility.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, so many thoughts. Noel.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, just to add to that, and that I think is probably one of the biggest parts of our work together is the clients that come to us are just absolutely desperate to get rid of this thing at all costs and have no space for it at all. And if they go to a practitioner, a swing coach, a hypnotherapist, etc., who claims that they've got the cure to this, and they don't get cured, oh my goodness, I mean, that just spirals it out of control even more. So, what you said was brilliant. Having space to let this, just to kind of, acknowledge it and know that I've got it and know that it's going to be around for a little while and I can do things that will slowly kind of move me in the opposite direction is massive. Because the moment you absolutely have to cure the yips at all costs, then it really starts to grip you. Okay. In a similar way, sorry if I may say, to myself as a youngster with a stutter. I mean, I had a stutter in my early 20s, and in a time where social confidence is important. And the more I tried to get rid of it, again, the more it gripped me. And eventually, I was like, oh, well, I kind of got it. And sure enough, it just kind of went away over a period of years. And once in a while, it might sort of crop up. And I think that is analogous to the yips. If you cannot have it at all and must get rid of it, that's a tough place.
Tell me if you think I'm crazy here, but as I'm listening to you guys, I'm taking this way beyond golf, because my approach as a long-time instructor / broadcaster, now podcaster, I take a very holistic sort of attack to improvement. And I'm listening to you guys going, goodness, I think people with sickness or whatever could be listening to this going, where, yeah, this is all encompassing, where if you just acknowledge that, yeah, I'm sick, but I'm doing this to get better, and it won't happen overnight, but I'm going to keep doing the right things, and then I'm sort of going to stack the odds in my favor. Are you getting where I'm going a little bit yet, Trevor?
That's a brilliant and beautiful observation, because I've learned so much more from clinical psychology than I have from sports psychology. When I kind of worked with clients with the yips and this issue in the early days, going back 5, 6, 7 years ago, quite frankly, a lot of those interventions were about as deep as a puddle.
Okay.
So I've been on this kind of huge journey within clinical psychology and neuroscience and some other bits and pieces to kind of bring together a much more holistic view of what are the key processes involved that help people to live better. And it turns out that those same processes can be kind of applied anywhere. So it's a great observation. And it just kind of struck me around this whole avoidance piece, and like you said, acknowledging that we are where we are, and if we juxtapose that with, I'm trying to get away from this thing, with a real sense of desperation. Well, do you know what the research says in clinical psychology?
Or make it
If you're
worse.
if you're not willing to feel anxious, do you know what you get?
What?
You get panic.
Which makes it even worse.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're not willing to have the experience, guess what you're going to get more of?
No, it's going to double down. Panic.
Yeah. So the more people try to kind of, control the handbrake and control the dashboard, and, their thoughts are like the passengers in the back, and the more they try and kind of control and don't think about the 17th sawgrass, don't think, if I said to you, don't think about a pink elephant,
It's the first thing I
right?
think.
And here we are. So, like Noel was saying, letting the windows down, getting a bit of fresh air in the room, like it's okay. We can talk about this. Like Voldemort is Voldemort. That's okay. We don't have to run, fight, and hide from this. So I remember actually just being pre-tournament. It was a big senior championship, and I was kind of sat with one of my senior golfers who was struggling with this, and you could kind of just see he had about half an hour before he teed off, and you're like, well, what if this happens? Like, what if this happens? And I looked him straight in the eyes, and I said, I can guarantee you, it will happen. And there was a palpable sense of relief. He was so relieved. It was like,
I would have slapped you if I was him.
but not in this kind of, I wasn't trying to do this clever reverse psychology, but just the relief, like it's okay. It's okay. You can still play your game and you can still attend to these processes. The handbrake will be pulled, but there's this much bigger journey that you're on. And it just this sense of relief. And actually he went out and played beautifully, and it wasn't an issue.
It's like me in a blood pressure test. Okay, I digress.
Yeah.
Noel, as you guys are talking, I got a few guys in my head. Will Zalatoris, Lucas Glover, Ernie Els, and of course Bernard Langer, who's beaten the Yips a few times. Now, with a lot of them, they just went to a different implement on the greens, whether it was arm lock or a broom handle putter or something. So they circumvented the issue, the electricity in the hands, for lack of a better descriptor, and the reactionary, well, I got to strike the ball because I can't strike it right now, with something that helped them in the physical sense. Is that enough to really help a person with a Yips in your technical experience?
Well, I mean that is interesting. So those players you're talking about, that was all putting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's all.
And my good friend Gordon Morrison, who's spent a lot of time into this and did his PhD in the Yips. So one of the things he found that putting and chipping, the way the Yips functions is really quite different. And a lot of the things that Gordon and I, some of the interventions that we developed a few years ago, didn't seem to connect with putting. But if you take putting the Yips generally happens in the dominant hand. And if you take the dominant hand off the handle in putting, it is almost always I hate to use the word cure, but a huge help. I mean, you will see that the Yips kind of disappear, which is why you see changes of putting grips, certainly the claw and the saw grips, anything that takes the dominant hand off in putting.
When you say dominant, you mean like the strong hand or the lead hand?
It would be their hand that they are handed, So right-handed golfer takes the right hand off, goes to a claw or a saw or the pencil grip or something that has relatively little control through that dominant hand, has staggering results. And often these people, when you ask them to hit a putt one-handed with their dominant hand, it is like they're wrestling a snake. I mean, it's there, and this is in non-anxiety conditions. And then there is this sort of electrical charge that sort of goes through that dominant hand. So that's putting. So that is, I wouldn't have thought that's everybody. I mean, the Yips, if you in the academic literature is type 1 or type 2. Type 1 being very much neurological, in which case, I mean, that is almost hardwired, and there's stuff going on there that, I mean, I'm sure Trevor will have more to say, but that is a hard fix. And then there's the more anxiety-based type 2, which is more around the interaction between technique and anxiety and experience, etc. But putting relatively easy to get around with that, taking the dominant hand off, chipping. That's more difficult. It doesn't really work, does it? I mean, you can't really chip with a saw
Folks
or
are starting
claw
to go
grip.
left, but they're starting to go left hand low. There's an
Which
increased incidence of that stuff in the game.
absolutely, and that would be definitely an intervention that I would absolutely give it a try and see if we can loosen the problem with it. I've seen many people have great success with that. I've seen people still yip with that, but it's definitely worth a go.
I wanted to keep it here real fast because I remember Will. It was at the 2022 PGA Championship, and I was on the call for CBS, and I had his group. It was him and Cam Young, and they both had the lead at one stage. And Cam made a late mistake on 16, and Will birdied 17 to get into, well, one back. I think it was of Mito Pereira, or two back. And on 18, drives in trouble, gets it on the green in 3, and holds us downhill 10-footer for par. And the stroke, we played it back multiple times because the stroke looked like it was a heart rate monitor going back. I mean, the thing went back and forth. But he caught enough ball that the thing went downhill and went in the hole. And he walked off the green and walked past me, and in a loud voice kind of looked at me and he goes, "Who said I can't putt?" It was like, and I was like, "Not me. I'm hardly saying it goes the smoothest stroke in the world, but you got the ball into the hole." And it sort of struck me in a way because there was clearly an issue because he's gone to work on it. In a way, he overcame that in the situation, despite the wiggly stroke, still to get the ball into the hole. Now, is that overcoming the yips, or is that just purely incidental?
What's your views on that, Trevor?
I think it's very, very commonplace that when people are struggling with this, one of the mechanisms that's kind of driving a lot of the issues, and particularly in terms of the anxiousness and the bad driving, is how they're relating to others. So there's a lot of this kind of FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. That's kind of, so if you're driving along the car, you're constantly looking around and checking who's behind me, who's to the side, who's witnessing this, who's watching this. And of course, I've said this to Noel before, nobody ever developed the yips on a desert island.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true.
And, this is very nested in a social context, like how we're relating to others. Because way back when, if we did something to have ourselves ejected from we grew up in small groups and tribes. If we did something that had us ejected from the group, then we were, basically a dead man walking. A lone monkey is a dead monkey is the famous expression that came out of evolutionary psychology. So we're super, super conscious, and particularly when this is happening and it's highly aversive, we naturally get, as in Will's case, he really got his back up about this. He was responding with this sense of, actually, I can do this, guys, right? Trying to make sure that he still could stay in this place of being seen by others as being competent, essentially. But in terms of him holding that putt and, grip change and putter changes and significant things like this, it's almost like, particularly with that change of grip, is almost like changing where the steering wheel is in the car, and going from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. Mm-hmm. And what can happen is it can open up a little bit of a window where your natural responses and what your brain is basically predicting is now kind of scrambled because it's not sure what's going to happen. So it's interesting when you get these huge changes in either changing the car or kind of changing where the steering wheel is, you get this little bit of a window of opportunity where if you can add in some ace driving, some of these other processes, then you can actually begin to drive away much more freely because the brain isn't sure what to predict, isn't sure what to expect. So that's often where you can see some success, but it's not just the change, it's the change plus the improvement in driving.
Saw that with Lucas Glover. Gosh, yes. I mean, he had a putt one time. It was plastered all over social media. With this putting stroke that he made, there was a low level of the camera and the ball from like 5 feet, and he barely made contact. I mean, I felt nauseous just watching it for him. Then he went to the broom handle putter, and the next thing he wins twice in a row, and he's making everything standing over just by that, what you talk about.
Yeah, and I believe he did a lot of work with a former Navy SEAL.
Yes.
And they did a lot of what's called exposure work. So really getting in touch with the thing that was really the field experience, like we said before about acknowledging. So he spoke a lot about attacking it. So from a Navy SEAL speak, getting in touch with the thing that was feared. And what you do in terms of that exposure experience is you begin to learn some new ways of responding to it. So the anxious kind of handbrake, quite linear experience he was having with that stuff he did with the former Navy SEAL, really helped develop some new responses in that space.
Is exposure experience something you use sometimes, Noel, when you're working with players?
I mean, yeah. I mean, so when I'm working with them, I am there working with them, actually playing the shots at the time. So Trevor would be, having conversations and getting to the deep issue. I am there while they're chipping away, and the Yips can be a difficult one to work with, because oftentimes while they're with me and feeling in a safe space, and they are willing to get it wrong. I mean, when you're willing to get it wrong, then you have more space, and things tend to go a whole lot better. So being able to recreate that scenario and create some level of exposure, I mean, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Difficult to create. I don't put them in a spot that puts huge pressure on, but I will try and put them in a spot where there's people around. I mean, as Trevor mentions, having the whole desert island thing, having that social context is huge. So I would definitely do that. But also, interestingly, I would try and have them bring up a lot of the negative chatter as well. So a lot of the psychology that Trevor and I would work with would be to recognize that we can have negative chatter, and it's okay to have that going on, as long as you are still paying attention to the important things, the motion of the club, etc., and what we're working on. So I would do what's called a diffusion exercise, where I would ask them to say, before they hit the shot, I'm going to duff it, or I'm going to completely top it. And then I might have them brush the ground while saying those things. So they're saying, I'm going to duff it. Meanwhile, just nicely brushing the ground. Then they step into the ball and they say, oh, I'm going to top it. Meanwhile, just paying attention to brushing the ground. And of course, with their attention on brushing the ground, they get it right. And this sort of slowly has them sort of diminish that sense of what their mind is saying is actually what's going to happen. So that when those negative thoughts do come up on the course, which is, I would say, almost inevitable, again, as Trevor would say, there's a different way of responding. They know that just because the mind is saying, I'm going to duff it, does not mean we're going to duff it. And also means we don't have to play this game of whack-a-mole with our thoughts, where we have to stop, change, think of something positive, and then kind of go through that whole game.
Remember Bob Rotella telling me one time, he's been like a mentor to me. He goes, listen, I've seen countless golfers with negative thoughts hit great shots, and countless golfers with very positive thoughts hit poor shots. As long as you kind of know what you got to do, then you're most of the way there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Superb.
I'm not sure where to go, but I wanted to swing this to you, please, Trevor, because I'm trying to put myself in the place of the yipper and the person who's listening to this going, okay, I feel safe. I'm understanding what they're saying, but I want to make this actionable for them. But before we go there, aside from working with you guys, before we go there, though, you'd made the point that now everything you guys are teaching and coaching and advising on, mentoring in, that there's now neuroscientific proof behind this stuff, which I think would put people's minds at ease a little bit more. Like if I'm going to the doctor and he goes, well, look, science proves that this, if we do this and this and that, you're going to be fine. So share that insight with us, please.
Yeah, how deep do you want to go? But I'll try and keep it up here at this really kind of light space, because the neuroscience gets kind of.
Well, I'll stop you while you think about it. We just had a neuroscience. Well, we had a few on the show. Most recent guy's Izzy Justice, he's wrote various books, and he's written this one, Your Brain Swings Every Club, Chasing 10 Hertz. You're nodding, no. Okay. So go where you wish.
So what we now kind of understand, and this has been the most exciting kind of theory to come along in neuroscience for a long time, is that the brain is, well, maybe if I ask you this question, like, have you ever noticed how hard it is to be present?
Your questions make me nervous. How hard it is to be present. Yes, it's very, very hard. And I would argue it's becoming increasingly hard given the world in which we currently live.
100%. That the world is kind of pulling our attention in certain directions, but also what we now understand about the brain specifically and the system that we've got, is our brain isn't designed to be present. Our brain is designed to predict.
Okay.
So the whole system that we're working with is designed to predict what's going to happen next. And of course, what it's using to predict about what's going to happen next is what came before. So there's this constant kind of toggling between past and future. And that really is the system that we've got. So I sometimes term these like the backseat drivers. So if you think about all of your thoughts as being like backseat drivers, and they're constantly like, what's that? Look out. What's that red light? Watch out. You know, there's all of this going on. And of course, what they're toggling between is what's up ahead and what's in the rearview mirrors, like what came before.
Yeah.
So that they are just all constantly, you know, toggling between those two experiences. And if we don't have the skills to be able to compose ourselves, as Noel was saying, to be able to kind of just gently name that. And, you know, to give you a kind of feet on the ground example of this, you know, I had one client whose passengers or his mind was particularly critical of him. So any small mistake, his mind would just absolutely jump on him and tear him to pieces. You know, a backseat driver type experience. And I said to him, you know, is there anyone in your life who's kind of a bit like that? You know, points out your shortcomings, you know, lets you know about your mistakes. And he just paused for a moment. He was like, oh my goodness, that's my mother-in-law.
You're going to get people into trouble with this show, you know that?
So we ended up calling his backseat driver Barbara. That was his mother-in-law.
Oh, brilliant.
So whenever this stuff showed up for him, he could just be like, oh yeah, thanks, Barbara. You know, thanks for that. You know, eyes back on the road. Let's start driving.
I can see hundreds of thousands of golfers around the world now calling the bad thought Sandy. You know what? In a funny way, though, that's liberating, Noel, because it's like I always say to golfers when I give golf lessons, like if they're doing like course management stuff, I'm like the great army generals of the world. They won because they were good strategists and they understood their arsenal of weapons. So first off, they had good recon, so they knew the landscape in which they were fighting in. They knew what they were capable of doing, and they didn't do anything else. And you kind of then know who the enemy is. Because if you know who the enemy is, then you know where to direct your focus. Now, not that you're directing your focus on the yips, but what Trevor is saying here makes a lot of sense because I'm like, okay, there's noise that's in my head. I'm going to name this and say, this is not real. This is just Sandy. And I'm going to go about doing what Noel wants me to do in terms of just brushing the grass, for argument's sake, or something simple and technical that allows the stroke to become more smooth and more repeatable.
Absolutely. I mean, yes. So we are. I mean, between us, there is a deep understanding of, or a common understanding, should I say, of the correct processes that we're trying to send people down that direction. We're trying to send people down, and having that sense of your mind is not reality. It is just thoughts that appear is certainly one of them. Having that open space to allow things to go wrong, that playfulness, if you like, is another big one. And then from a technical perspective, I mean, there's probably half a dozen absolutely core things that I would work with, which Trevor is also quite familiar with. So when the student is working with Trevor, he knows what I've worked on, and vice versa. There is that commonality.
I want to give a quick lesson with the both of you involved to golfers who have the yips. Like, well, I might not get to see these guys, but I want to use some of the techniques. Okay. But before we go there, I want both of you to respond to this question with a quick answer. The yips, because I think people mistakenly make it all physical. It's the reaction in my hands with a driver or a putter, whatever the case might be. The yips, more mental, more physical. What's the answer in both of your opinions?
We just wrote an article for the PGA magazine here in the UK, and the opening line was about zebras. Are they white with black stripes or black with white stripes? And what we basically went on to say is it's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. The question is really like, how do we get this zebra moving in a positive direction? So for some people, let me say it this way. So a lot of historical traditional psychology has been very kind of just dropping down ideas onto, populations. So this is what the studies say, this works for everyone. But what it works out is that's a really horrible way to look at human beings, because we don't get a one size fits all, we get a one size fits none.
Okay, right.
A lot of those processes don't fit anyone. So my response to that would be, is it this one or is it this one? It's probably both, and it's bespoke to the person. So at times it's going to be leaning a little bit more towards the technical, as where kind of Noel would come in. At times it's going to be leaning a little bit more towards the psychological, which is where I would come in. But generally speaking, it's a combination of both. And there's a little bit of a wiggling path to kind of find out what works for the individual.
And in that, Trevor, I mean, I've had some students who've come to me, and a couple of sessions. Their yips are absolutely manageable, should we say, or almost sort of almost not there anymore. Again, not wanting to use the word cure, and I wouldn't even send them to Trevor. I mean, they just seem to be happy and on their way. There's not many, but that sometimes is the case, and I'm sure you would have the same experience where you wouldn't send them my way. But the vast majority of cases, having that double play of the technique, the attentional processes that I would sort of suggest for them, and your sort of deeper work is absolutely where it needs to be.
Okay, one more question along those lines. No, I'm a golf instructor deep down. I now have a microphone, which has made me more well known. But I would always, and looking back, maybe it was intellectually lazy of me, but any problem in golf was always a golf swing problem or a putting stroke problem. It was physical. But now I've learned more, and I've learned there's more to it. And now it's, in a weird way, I'm sort of gravitating towards a lot of these golf swing melodies are a function of misunderstanding or misinformation or something that's more of the mental variety. So that's sort of where I'm sitting. But the yips, could it be a function, or could the yips happen because I've had like really wonky chipping action my entire life? Then I started mishitting a bunch of them. Then I built this fear of the chipping shot, and then the thing perpetuated.
Absolutely, yeah, and there will be a portion of golf coaches who will see it as completely that way. There'll be yips deniers, if you like, who see it as completely technical, which in turn creates the anxiety, which is what you've explained, isn't it? And certainly for some people, having poor technique and a whole history of poor shots and everything that goes with it will then develop into the yips. But I mean, there's so many scenarios where that's not the case, and you just see people with lovely technique, or certainly highly functional technique, and the yips still arrive. So, yeah, I mean, as Trevor was saying, the yips comes in all different forms, and that is just one of them.
All right, cool.
But to that point, I would always start with technique. I mean, I always start with clearing up the obvious things, which are lots of lag, low point issues, lots of sway, etc. I would get to the point where it's simple and functional, and then we can start working on deeper stuff. I mean, you don't want to be working on the mental stuff when you've got a whole load of other issues clouding the situation.
Well, you're preaching, brother, and you've said exactly what I was feeling. Because look, I was a good player back in my day. Always been a decent instructor, sought out by people. And now I play golf ceremonially. And I've always been a tremendous pitcher of the golf ball. But now living in the southeast of the United States in the summertime, it's grainy and you get some really tight lies. And I've landed one or two of them in the wrong place, and I've hit ground before ball, and the ball's moved just a few feet in front of people. Yeah. And now it doesn't matter how much I focus on the path of the club being correct and the landing spot. I get over the ball and I'm still like, oh, shit. Yeah, you're laughing because because this is the origin. And not that I'm yippy yet, but I'm standing over the ball going, okay, I know I've got to do this, but holy cow, this club's feeling like a little bit of a rattlesnake in my hands. So have a go. Help me, Trevor, please.
So, Mark, we've identified that there are 4 key contextual factors in terms of predicting whether the yips appear and get worse. Right. So one of them is actually injuries. So we call that the fender benders. So I've had quite a few clients with full swing yips who actually have a long injury history, and the body develops kind of like holding patterns, again, to try and prevent further accidents. So fender benders would be one. Driving without insurance is another one. And this is kind of like the sad piece of this is where in their younger years, or going kind of, if you retrace people's kind of footsteps a little bit, you'll find that when mistakes were made, they were punished. So that can be coaches, parents. Think of a Will Zalatoris, social media just jumping on him. Yeah. So that's like driving without insurance. The etymology of that word insure means to make safe. So there's a sense of not being safe kind of in that situation. And we've also got, and apologies for this, but I call them STDs. And STDs stand for socially transmitted dogmas. I wanted to tidy that up real quick, but it does get a good laugh with my college kind of players. So socially transmitted dogmas, these kind of ideas and these cultural beliefs that are just kind of in the water supply, which, something like, in order to play well, I must feel confident, right? Like I have to have this feeling. I'm not allowed to feel, out with the anxiety and with confidence. And what ends up happening, unfortunately, is people start putting out of bounds stakes around certain experiences. So all of a sudden, anxiousness, doubt, worry, concern, these stuff show up and people are like, no, I can't have that. And metaphorically, they're putting out of bounds stakes around what they can and can't experience. And of course, then the golf course just gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And then the final one is what I call paper cuts. So it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's kind of the one you were describing, where people have these little paper cut moments. And then all of a sudden it starts being like, I'm here again. So they start getting... They start getting triggered, and they start kind of seeing a certain lie or a certain club or a certain situation, a certain person watching. And of course, now their backseat drivers have a lot to say. Now they're starting to worry about their technique. They kind of sense the red and blue lights, almost like the police are following them. They're looking in the rearview mirrors. They're checking around. And of course, what they're not doing is they're not ace driving. So those are the four factors.
I think if I can add to that, Trevor, I think what you were alluding to, Mark, there was that grainy grass. I'm an ambassador at a club called Monterey in the Algarve in Portugal, where it's all Bermuda grass. And if you've got that lie, which is into the grain, having anxiety and worry about it is absolutely the appropriate response to that shot. You need a different technique. You need to understand how to use the bounce, and you need to understand that this could go wrong, and I'm going to be okay with it. We can't just jump in there and approach it as if I'm all confident with this. I'm going to drive the front edge in like I do normally. It's going to embarrass you every time.
Do you know the alternate response to said shot is for me?
Go on.
A somewhat wise golfer is just turn the potential disaster into mitigate that by putting something safely on the green with a different club, even a putter if it's possible. Just to kind of get by the situation.
Absolutely, and again, if you're into the grain and and it's that particular lie, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Right. There'll be part of you that says I've wimped out of this, but absolutely, that's just clever.
Well, yes, the thing you guys have been great. I mean, I could keep you forever because my mind just is spinning. You make a statement and I go elsewhere in my head, but I'm trying to stay on the tracks here. You made such a good statement, Trevor, where you're like, it's not one size fits all, it's one size fits none. So I would be doing people a disservice to have you guys say, okay, if you got the yips, go and try this. You're given plenty of ideas. You've at least shed light on the thing where they can now approach the thing with less trepidation and more hope. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys, or I don't know if you give online lessons, but if people were looking to search you out to get your takes on stuff, where would they find you guys? What's the social media? How do people get in touch with you?
So on Instagram, and just, I also want to say, just it's been such a thrill kind of coming onto the show and sharing a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years. And it's a really, really tough place to be. So we're excited to share this work. So massive thanks for having us on. I can be found on Instagram. Trevor Jones_aware is probably one of the best places to find me. And I guess, Noel, your website is a pretty good place for you.
Yeah, probably so. Golfcoach.online or my YouTube channel, Golf Coach Dr. Noel.
I'm going to come find you in Algarve when I got some time off eventually, somewhere, sometime.
Yeah, you'd love it.
Listen, guys, you've been so great. This is such a scary sort of a topic. And, for me, it was a challenge to navigate this thing. But it needs to be talked about because you say 50% of the world's golfers are struggling with this malady in one way.
Have struggled at some point. Yeah, at some point in their career, will experience the yips.
It's incredible. So I'm glad we got to shed light on it. I'm so glad you guys would share the information and the insights. And I hope people will reach out because, golf has blessed me wildly. And that's why I do what I do here. And, we're supposed to play this game because you ask folks why you play golf. Well, for the relaxation and for the camaraderie and stuff. That's all fine and dandy till you're standing over a 5-footer and you don't feel like you can make contact. There's no fun in that. And you guys have made me feel good about this because I feel like at least we're doing something to set people on the right path. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Absolute pleasure.
Mark, it's been great.